Hello class, we're going to be talking about DNA today. It is a term that you have heard many times, but we're going to talk a little bit about its structure so that you understand it a bit more. Go ahead and update your table of contents, the front of your notebook. DNA structure, page 84. DNA output, page 85. Feel free to pause it if I am going too fast, because I know I am. On page 84, you're going to label at the very top DNA equals, and then the actual word that DNA comes from, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, the deoxyribo portion has to do with the sugar that is DNA is composed of, and then nucleic acid comes from the macromolecule that you all are familiar with. It was one of the 4 main organic molecules that we learned at the beginning of the year. So that is the main meaning of that word. First things first, we already know this, but I'm going to remind us because it's always good to review. We have a cell, we have a nucleus, we have chromosomes and DNA. Now we know human body cells have 46 and human gametes start with 23. So these chromosomes, if I were to zoom in on them, they're actually strands of DNA. So if I were to zoom in on maybe just this piece, that is actually what you're used to seeing when someone talks about DNA. With these like steps in the ladder, if this were a twisted ladder. We call this shape a double helix. That's literally the name for the shape of DNA. It's pretty unique and awesome. Okay, so if we were to zoom in on our double helix even more, we would see that it has coded, just like in computer codes. DNA is a code. So it has 4 basic bases. So there's this red one, which I'm going to call adenine. Adenine always pairs with thymine. Okay, and anytime there is a guanine, it is going to pair with a cytosine. Okay, so that's just the rungs of the ladder on the DNA. So guanine and cytosine. So A will always pair with T, and G will always pair with C, and obviously the opposite is true. So T will always pair with A, and C will always pair with G. That's sort of just the rules in general. So if I were to take the code A, T, G, G, C, A, T, CCA, I would know exactly what comes next. I would know that A, if it's making a copy of itself, if RNA is turning into DNA, if it's copying, A would pair with T, T with A, and so on and so forth. So you'd really end up with this code. Last thing to understand is that if we were to zoom in on just the backbone of a DNA strand, it's actually got a nitrogen base. We've talked before about nucleotides. So it was one of our 4 main macromolecules. It's the one that sort of looks like a house. And one side looks like this, and one side looks like this. So these are nucleotides. This is a monomer for a nucleic acid, and of course deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the Na in DNA. So this part of it, let's use multicolor. This is the base. Okay. This is the phosphate group. And this guy is the sugar. So that all makes up the structure of DNA. So on the right side, on page 85, is your DNA output. Go ahead and label that at the top. And there's 4 basic questions. So these cover exactly what we just talked about, so it shouldn't be too difficult. But if you have questions, you can review the video. So it says, what's the code? So I've given you a strand of RNA. You're going to figure out what the matching base pairs would be and write that in the box. Question 2, where is the DNA found in the cell? So we did talk about that. Again, if you're not sure, go back and listen. Number 3, what does DNA have to do with you? So we talked about that at the beginning of the video, and we've talked about that throughout the year, but just kind of summarize that for me. And lastly, how is DNA like a computer? So I want you to think about how can we compare those 2 things? So those are your questions. For your output, I would like you to write the questions out and then write your answers in full sentences. Thanks.